if he just says, Betty, well done, good and faithful servant. That's all. That's all.
That's all that
That's
matters.
all I want.
Yeah.
That's all that matters. Yeah.
Welcome to Sports Spectrum, keeping Jesus in the sports conversation. Here's your host for today's show, former ESPN producer, Jason Romano.
Well, it is a treat today on Sports Spectrum to welcome Betty Wiseman. She's known as Belmont Betty. We'll just say that. And it's nice to have Betty here with us, longtime Belmont women's basketball coach and just a legend at that wonderful university in Tennessee. So it's nice to welcome Belmont Betty to Sports Spectrum. Hi, Betty Wiseman. How are you?
Hey, Jason. I'm happy to be here.
Absolutely. It is really great to talk to you. And when I saw a story that was done, I saw it on YouTube. It was about 8 minutes long, and it was kind of a mini documentary on your life and your journey. But I saw so much of the heart of the gospel in your words and in all this basketball and life journey that you've been on. I just feel like the gospel, it feels like in watching that is the center of who Betty is. Can you start with that? Talk about your faith a little bit and Christ in the life of Betty Wiseman?
Wow, I sure can. That's my greatest joy, is sharing Christ. And I'll just say right off the bat, Jason, that my story is God's story, and I'm just living it. And from the very beginning, I grew up in a Christian home, and my parents, everything revolved around church and school and home on the farm. I'm a farm girl, and I'm proud of it. And I have some humble beginnings, but I didn't get started in sports until this was before Title IX, obviously, and I didn't start until maybe the 6th or 7th grade. But, I grew up at First Baptist Church in Portland, Tennessee, and I literally cut my teeth on God's word. And I loved hearing and talking about missions. I was involved in missions. I was involved in singing in the choir. And, it's practically one of the places I lived was church. And so I gave my heart and my life to Christ. I knew who Jesus was, and from as long as I can remember. But when I was 11 years old, I surrendered my life to Christ. And I said, I want to live for you, whatever that means. And I just remember I couldn't wait to get to school the next day and tell somebody. I wanted to tell my teachers, and I ran in to tell 4th grade, hey, I have Jesus in my heart and my life. I'm going to live for him. So that's just the beginning of my journey. And then fast forward, I just remember when I was a junior in high school, our church had a migrant worker who came to our town, and we had migrant workers she was a missionary, and she worked with these people who came and got the crops in, and they asked for a driver for her to do. That she wanted to have church for them on Sunday evening, and so I volunteered. And I'll never forget the Spanish that I heard. I couldn't understand what she was saying, but my role was to play with the children, to keep them occupied. And the best I could, for a good 6 weeks there, I just lived for those moments. And, you fast forward to today, and in June, probably was my last overseas mission trip. I was with a medical team. But I had to, I went to Belmont, and there were no sports for women in '61. And so I played intramurals and was just angry almost that there was nothing for girls. And my senior year, I went into the president called me in and said, we want you to stay on and take over the physical education program. I mean, I never applied for a job, Jason. Now that's a God story. Never applied for a job.
Yeah.
So, I got my master's degree and started teaching health, physical education, exercise science, teacher education. And it was during that year that I walked in his office and I said, Dr. Gabhart, who would become my mentor until he died at 95. He was president of the university. What 20-something-year-old woman in the 60s would go into a college president's office and he listened? He listened to me. That was unheard of at that time. And he said, Betty, I think you can do it, but I don't have any money. And I said, hey, just give me enough to buy some uniforms. We'll use the men's basketballs, et cetera, et cetera. So I started from scratch, and I'm telling you, it was really from scratch. And we had to play AAU teams because there were no local teams, no teams in Tennessee. And then other teams began starting programs after that.
Yeah, we think about your basketball experience. All we hear is the state of Tennessee, right? And you're starting a program at Belmont. Yeah. And I immediately think of Pat Summitt, the late great Pat Summitt, and all of the success she had. And Tennessee is kind of this birth haven in many ways for major college basketball. What was that time like in the 60s and early 70s as women's basketball started to have opportunities for these girls to play at a pretty big level? And you were kind of on the groundswell of that.
Well, it was 68, 69, the school year that I started the team. And, the teams we played were AAU. The first team I played was in Iowa, and it was sponsored by some corporation. And we got beat. We drove in 2 old station wagons. We got beat like 40 points. Oof. And I'm thinking, goodness gracious, what have I gotten myself into? But they returned the game later in the season, and we upset them at home. So we progressed. But all that to say, Pat Summitt, I started high school basketball camps at the same time, and Pat was in my high school basketball camp between her junior and senior year. So I knew her and tried to recruit her. Other women, and were physical education teachers, most of us who in those early years who started programs. So we were teaching full time, probably running intramural programs, and at the same time trying to coach a basketball team and get people to play. But Pat was in my camp, and I'm telling you, she was as tough then. Yeah. You could tell she was gonna be a great coach, and she was, and a good friend.
That's great. Betty Wiseman's our guest here on Sports Spectrum. She's known as Belmont Betty. What does Belmont basketball mean to you when you think about, that's a open-ended question, right? But you started there, you went to school there, you start a program there, you're still connected to this school in so many ways and have seen even recently success, winning tournament games and watching the program. I even saw you pop up on my Twitter feed a couple of years ago dancing as Belmont Betty. And I'm thinking, that's probably not where Betty Wiseman thought this was all going to go start this program. Yeah. But it must mean so much to you, this program and in this school.
It does. Jason, I'm single, never married. I've never birthed a child, but I have the biggest family. I have more people in my life, and Belmont became my home and my family. And I was only an hour away from my home and my parents, but all my family, immediate family, is gone. And so God gave me a place to invest my resources and my love for people, my love for basketball, my love for Christ. I coached the first 16 years, and Title IX was coming along and everybody was moving forward, and I'm still teaching full time. I'm still doing all the things I did in the beginning. And so I said, if the program is going forward, I'm going to have to retire. Let somebody there be forced to hire somebody full time. And I'm a teacher at heart. I still am.
Mm.
So it was about 8 years after that I went on my first overseas mission trip with my church with some women, and I went to South America, Chile, and it was like going back in time for me because I was in really backward places, and I mean, it was really rustic. And God, I remember the moment God took me outside of a meeting, and I said, God, what are you doing? What's happening? And he said, you've been going out your door into a small world, Belmont, Nashville, Tennessee, traveling a little bit. I'm calling you into my world now. And so it was like wow. There's a time when I was young growing up, I thought, I may want to be a missionary and just, gosh, how fun would it be to share Christ all the time? Just verbalize it. Yeah. Well, from that time on, I came back from that trip and I kept saying, I want to get my students involved. I want them to experience what I experienced. And if you have something good in your life, you want your people to have it too. And so my office became a prayer room. I started our sports ministry program. I've taken student athletes all over the world for the last 28 years, just sharing the gospel, using sports as a platform to connect with people. When you go into all the world, it's a little bit different. It humbles you. You see God in a whole different perspective.
Yes. And
you take those athletes and put them in places that we've been, and then we sit down and talk about what's happening to you. So what's your role now, et cetera, et cetera.
Why is basketball and sports such a great platform to share why is sports a great mission field to share the gospel?
Well, it's like me. There's a little girl inside me that still wants to come out and play. And when I see a ball, I'm going to pick it up and hold it, kick it around, a soccer ball. And I think sports and music, because it brings something out within ourselves that is just different from anything else. And you put these basketball players on an outdoor court with kids, and and parents and the community coming out, and you play with them, and you sit them down, and you tell them what you're really there for. And I'm telling you, it first of all, it changes our lives. It's changed my life. So sports, just to have been involved in it for 80 plus years now. That you saw me dancing. There's a little girl that just loves to have fun, and I like to move. And if I'd known I was on ESPN, I probably would have crawled under that bleacher at the moment.
Yeah, you're not looking for the attention, Betty, right?
My goodness. No, somebody said, you won't believe what's happening. And I said, oh my goodness. But hey, it's brought, that was a moment in time for women's basketball that I felt like, whoa, we have arrived, and I can, that's why it means so much to me. I know our beginnings. And, I tell students all the time, I still go to Belmont, and I have an appointment at 1:00 with a student just to talk, and eventually we'll talk about the gospel. But, it's hard to explain how God just opens doors through sports.
Yeah.
And more and more, I think you're seeing student athletes get excited about the gospel and who God is. And God's been able to do a lot of things through sports.
You work still, like you said, an appointment today with young people. You take them on missions trips. You're still involved with so many young people. There's a stigma there, I think, that, oh, Betty Wiseman, she's Belmont Betty, but she's 80 years old. What could she possibly know about a 20-year-old kid, who's going through basketball? But I don't think that that's the case. I think in general, I think your example right now of pouring into young people and why those young ladies want to sit with someone like you is an example for all of us as we get older to remember that these young people, they may think they want to be independent and living on their own and doing their own thing, but I think they crave wisdom. They crave people that want to pour into them. Can you kind of share a little bit about those unique relationships and personal relationships you have with that younger group of people?
Well, I'm just trying to give back because there's been so many people in my life who have just poured themselves into me from an early child all through, and people who still do. But I'm very real with these students. I will speak in classes. There's a class about finding your purpose in life, and so I share my story, and I say, listen, you need to sit at the feet of people who have been on the journey. There's a lot to learn from the older generation.
Yeah.
There are questions I still wish I could ask my parents and my grandparents and some of these people that I sat with, that I wasn't smart enough at the time to realize that, hey, I'm sitting with greatness here. Feed me. And so, I give everybody knows my email address, and the students can email after I speak, or student athletes or whatever. And I'll make an appointment, and I have a little space at Belmont that they provide for me, and I will meet them, and we will talk about who they are, etc. But eventually I'm going to ask them who they are in Christ. And I want to hear their story. And then some of them I'll walk the journey with, and I've led several to Christ. And but to whom much is given, much is required. And I want to give my life away until Jesus calls me home.
I love that.
He's given me a body that's strong, and I know I'm blessed at 80 years old. I could stay at home, and I don't know anything on TV I really want to sit and watch all day, but yeah. And you know what? It energizes me. I'm getting just as much from it as those young people. I love young people.
Yeah, me too. That's why I wanted to have you on, because I knew that would be something that would motivate me to continue to pour into young people as well. Can you share? You have story upon story upon story, I'm sure. Our time is limited. Do you have one story that you can think of a young person that you saw grow in their faith, that you saw Christ radically changed them? Is there one story you can share? Obviously, if it's confidential, leave the name out if you want to, but whatever you feel comfortable with, does one story kind of come to mind to share?
Well, there's, oh my goodness, there are so many stories, but I had a young girl about 5 years ago who came and was a member of the basketball team, and she was homesick. And I remembered how homesick I was because I'd never been off the farm.
Right.
I'd never been anywhere really. And now I've been all over the world. But, the coach Bart called me and said, would you come and talk to her? And well, I just took her under my wing. We would go out to eat. She was homesick. Homesickness is, with college students, and I've dealt with it so much. It's the real deal.
Oh yeah.
And you can actually get sick. And so I just walked the journey with her, and she went on a mission trip with me. The whole team did. And it was on that mission journey, the last day, we're outside playing, and I'm sitting under a tree just watching at that point and about to wrap up. And here she comes, Jay. I'll call her Jay. And here she comes, and tears are running down her cheeks. And I know what's happening. I know what's happening. I can tell it. And so I said, "Hey, Jay, what's going on?" She said, "I don't know. Something's happening to me." And I said, "I know exactly what's happening to you. I've been waiting for it." And so we went over in this rustic little place. And I said, "You're ready to give your life to Christ, aren't you?" And she said, "Yes, just help me, help me."
Wow.
So we say a prayer under that old tree down in Brazil. And wow, she's coaching now. She got married this summer. And I'm telling you, there's a bond between us. I text her all the time. There's a bond between us. She's my child. She's my spiritual child. And nothing, Jason, nothing takes the place of that kind of relationship. When you can help somebody see the light, accept it, and live it.
It's powerful. Yeah. It's funny. You said you had never been married, no kids, but it sounds like you got a lot of kids, a lot of children in your life.
I do. Grandchildren, great-grandchildren.
That's right.
I'm blessed. I'm blessed. I'm blessed to be here with you today to say that, wow, to whom much is given, much is required. This story is not about me. It's about who God is, how he can take an individual, if you are all in, and he can transform the world. That's what he did with 12 disciples, right?
Yeah, changed the world with only 12. That's all he needed.
That's what he's doing with you with this podcast. And I affirm you in doing this. I've been on a lot of podcasts, and along the way, they'll know who I am in Christ, whether they ask me or not.
Yeah.
So
we want to ask. We always say Sports Spectrum is about keeping Jesus and bringing Jesus into the sports conversation, where so many sports entities, including my former employer at ESPN, their job, this is not a knock on them, but their job is not to do it. Their job is to cover sports. And when I was given this opportunity to come into sports ministry, that's why I'm so intrigued by your story, because I love the idea of using sports just as another example to be able to point people to Christ, because there's so many people in the sports world, athletes, coaches, broadcasters, you name it, who have chosen the sports world and been given a gift, but ultimately they want to shine for Christ and not for, public applause, if you will. So,
our sports ministry program, when I retired, I put a proposal into the president to have a particular person, somebody to come in as part of their responsibility. I did it on my own, but we took our baseball team went to Nicaragua this summer. We had 7 athletes give their lives to Christ. We sent a team to Poland to work with Ukrainian refugees. That's a part of this ongoing program we have. I know one girl professed Christ and was baptized in the lake over there.
Incredible.
One of our we had one of our basketball girls give her life to Christ when they were on their trip in Italy. So it's ongoing, and I think young people are looking for something in this world.
Absolutely.
That they can count on. They're looking for it, but people got to be bold enough to say, "Hey, let's talk about this." And any student who comes in my office that I have a time with, we get to this faith thing. what is your faith journey? Do you have a faith journey? Let's talk about it.
Mm.
And I know that's what I'm going to talk about at 1:00 with this student who's going to be waiting for me. And Christ is in that room, and there's 3 of us always.
Yeah, that's
Uh,
beautiful. Well, let me ask you, Betty, as we wind down here, that nickname, Belmont Betty, I just think it's such a fun nickname. Where did that come from, and what does that nickname mean to you today when you're kind of referred to or called, there she is, it's Belmont Betty?
well, it happened on when we were playing Tennessee in the tournament a couple of years ago in Knoxville, and Shamika, not no. Anyway, so the commentator, they were filming me, and I didn't know that. And then all at once, I think she said, "Hey, Belmont Betty's dancing again," or something like that. That's where it came from. Yeah.
So and now people refer to you and call you that, right?
They do. They do. Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's cool. It's okay. It's okay because it's all wrapped up together. It's like a gift every day, and I get up and take the wrappings off that gift. Belmont Betty comes out, and God has something for her. So I what else would I want to be at this age?
A good nickname, Betty. I mean, I would love to be known as the school that I've been a part of for, so many years, to be known as, Ravina Jason, which is the school that I went to in high school, So I think it's great that you're Belmont Betty. I wanted to ask you this too, thinking about, you started in 1961. I think you said when you arrived at Belmont. So much has changed in our society, in our culture, especially even in the sports world, for the so many years that you've lived. But what's remained constant? Like, I think Christ has remained constant. I think that's the easy answer here. But what has remained the same? Like, what hasn't changed from the 18-year-old girl that was at Belmont to the 18-year-old that you're talking to today? What's still the same when when you compare it to the first few days, months, years that you were walking through those Belmont doors?
Wow, that's a great question. I walk around on campus and I see these young people, and I think of who I was. I was looking for something. I just didn't know what it was. Of course, I had Christ in my heart and my life, but I think college students are looking for something that's authentic, that's real, that's not a part of the world view. They're so consumed with the social media. They're so consumed with so many things that when you get a group together and then you just hone in on and you start talking about spiritual things, they're hungry for something that they can hold on to, that's meaningful in their lives, not something they see and it goes away. All this. I don't know if that makes sense, but I think young people are really looking for people who are authentic. For the gospel is intriguing to them when you talk about it. I mean, they want to know more. So I think they're looking for Jesus. They just don't know, a lot of them, who he is.
Yeah. Well, when you say authentic, that's something probably that hasn't changed, something that's authentic and real. Go to being a coach in the 70s or the 80s or the 90s and being around young people. That's pretty constant, right? It's the same then as it is now.
It is. It's just the world's changed around it, right?
Sure. Different distractions, right?
Different distractions.
Yeah.
But to be 80 years old and to have seen all I've seen, Jason, how blessed am I?
Mm.
How blessed am I?
Yeah.
I mean,
you're blessed.
these young people, I want them to, it's all about them, but I'm going to tell you, God feeds me every day. And I think he does that when we're faithful to him.
Mm.
Just when we give our lives away, he gives it right back to us. And that's what we're doing today, you and I.
Oh yeah.
And just seeing you on this screen and having a conversation, you could be one of my students. Yeah.
I'm just the 50-year-old student, Betty, not the 20-year-old.
Hey, you know what? Hey, there's a little boy inside of you that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. Well,
So,
the beauty
you know,
is I have a daughter who's the age of the kids that you're pouring into. She's 19 and a sophomore in college up in Indiana Wesleyan, and growing in her faith and looking for something real and authentic. All the stuff that you've described to the young people that you pour into, I see with my own daughter. By the way, homesickness, like she's 12 hours away from us. I live in Connecticut. She's in Indiana. But it's all part of the growing process and watching this young lady become, who she is in Christ. And so everything you're describing, I'm just thinking about my own daughter, Betty.
I had a girl from a college in Connecticut somewhere, a university, who just emailed me and said she saw something about me, and she said, she said, I like to do podcasts. And, I was a little hesitant at first, and I thought, well, it's a student. So I let her, so we had a podcast, and I couldn't see her, but I talked to her. And before I finished, I said, listen, let me tell you what it's all about. And I shared the gospel. I shared my faith, and I said, I don't know where you are. And that probably stunned the heck out of her, but she listened, and she responded. Just, she said, thank you she just thanked me for going in that direction. So, if I'm talking to anybody, I'm going in that direction. So you might as well get ready for it.
Oh yeah. Well, I'm glad you went in that direction with us, Betty. My last question for you, 80 years old, who knows how long the Lord, I say that for every person. I don't just say that to 80-year-olds. I say that to myself too. But when God calls you home, what do you think you want those left behind here to remember about Betty Wiseman?
That she was just sold out to Jesus. All this basketball and everything is great and good. But the final, he just said, if he just says, Betty, well done, good and faithful servant. That's all. That's all that matters. That's all I want.
Yeah.
That's all that matters. Yeah.
That's beautiful. Betty, thank you for coming on Sports Spectrum and sharing a little bit of your story. Belmont Betty, Betty Wiseman, we appreciate you so much, and we'll continue to be cheering you on from afar, and hopefully we'll see you dancing on ESPN again sometime. That'd be fun.
Hey, you may do it. God bless.
Thank you, Betty. Thanks so much for watching today on Sports Spectrum. Make sure you click that subscribe button so you don't miss any other videos. And if you want more stories on sports and faith, check out our website, sportsspectrum.com.